What's up, you guys? You read the title right. This is what we're doing, and I don't think I'm going to change this deck's name because I think it perfectly encapsulates what exactly this is. A lot of you know that I launched a Patreon a little bit back. It's an awesome kind of ongoing Kickstarter that helps out the channel. One of the rewards that you can get for one of the higher tiers is telling me what to do for an entire week. The last week of every month is going to be kind of user-submitted creations where you give me a general idea, and in this case, the idea I was given by Ogre down in the comments, if you want to blame someone, was mill. He was like, make a deck that mills correctly. And I said, I will try my best. And what ended up happening as a result of that trying is this deck that wins for reasons I don't understand. I've got a couple of playtest videos that'll be going up throughout the week. At some point, I'll find a place to put those. But for right now, what do you say we just look at a damn mill deck and try to figure out why this happens? We've got 19 creatures, 19 other spells, and 22 lands. We got very good rankings with control and strength and speed and synergy, which is always great. We are very obviously skewed blue because we need mill, because that's what we're trying to do, but we also have to throw in, you know, as many white cards as we can, because I need Wall of Omens and I need Planar Cleansing. Synergy should be higher than that, actually. We'll talk about that in a minute, I guess. Mana curve, not super important on this one. Of course, we want to start early game, but a lot of this was just drawn out and formed simply because of the combinations that mill. So I didn't give a whole lot of thought to the mana curve. Of course, I, mucked about with the lands a little bit to try and get the right ratio there. But the curve wasn't so much the issue here. I was just kind of worried about getting those synergies going on. Wall of Omens, we'll just bring up Doorkeeper right now because that's one of the main synergies that we worked with. Because it's actually pretty powerful. This guy's an 0-4, so he's going to stop early game aggro decks. This deck is really questionable. I honestly don't know why it wins. But we'll muddle through. Because those early game decks, like the decks that can have like a 4-4, what's his nuts out there on turn 2, hoplites. You would almost want to put dedicated removal in here, but you don't have room for it. I mean, you need the board wipes rather than dedicated removal more than anything. So I know there's going to be a lot of controversy around that main decision. And of course, the board wipe I'm talking about, where's my 2-drops? Would be Reprisal, because that would... Everything else in this deck actually gels very well to stopping early game threats from aggro decks, because a lot of them are 1/1s and stuff like that. I mean, once they hit 3 mana, we're in a little bit of trouble. Luckily, we have, ways to deal with that a little bit. But this is... I mean, it's a rough ride against aggro decks no matter what you do. I just looked at it like we had to put in... the Planar Cleansing, because every once in a while you need that reset. And Planar Cleansing even gels extremely well with stuff like Chasm Skulker. So everything in the deck synergizes with everything else really, really well. It's actually a good deck synergistically. And one of the main synergies, to circle back to my original point, is this right here. Target player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of creatures with Defender you control. That kind of dictates a lot of the rest of this deck. So I want card draw, obviously. Blue-white. So Wall of Omens uses Defender. It gels. It works perfectly with the rest of the deck. It's a 2-drop creature. It's going to stop early game threats from our opponent. The 2/2 First Striker, Attended Knight. It's going to stop a lot of problems for us early game. Not to mention the fact that we get to draw a card when we play it, and it has the added bonus of being a defender, which plays into that other thing. 3 copies of Wall of Omens. 2 copies of Planar Cleansing, because like I said, I opted for the board wipe. I guess you could take Planar Cleansing out to put in the Reprisal, but to be honest with you, I mean, obviously, I do these deck techs to give you ideas so you can make your own decks and have a lot of fun with the game. I would say that would probably be a mistake, putting the Reprisals in instead of the Planar Cleansing. I think Planar Cleansing is going to work for you more times than Reprisal. There's going to be matches where you have a 4/4 Hoplite on turn 2 you're going to lose those matches, okay? Like, I've won one, I think, against an aggro build, and it didn't have that kind of combination. I don't know what this deck would do against a 4/4 Hoplite turn 2. I mean, you can get stuff. My only thing is that's a 1/3. But then they can burn out everything if they have the red removal spell, the 3-mana removal spell, Wrath of God or Wrath of the Gods or whatever. But at least they can't shock this guy. That's really the only thing. They can't shock it. They'd have to do something fling related or something like that, because it's just combat damage for the Jellyfish Man. Oh, Planar Cleansing. You know, you need to wipe out, because Planar Cleansing is going to save you against kind of every deck type at least once, whereas Reprisal is going to save you from those unfortunate circumstances where you're in a real big bind early game. I think Planar Cleansing is a more valuable card in this build. Herndon Crab is absolutely a must. He's got the landfall ability. Obviously, you're going to mill the top 3 cards of your opponent's library whenever he's out. He says, howdy do. That's a good time. This is sorcery speed, 5 damage. See, the thing is that our opponent is at 60 life when we try and mill them. Like, we could take Tome Scour out and put in Reprisal for a more defensive build. But then you're taking out part of your win con. Earlier today, I was able to mill 10 cards for 2 mana with 2 Tome Scours, activate Doorkeeper's ability, and then activate a Millstone, and you just win. Like, that was a ton of cards off the top of my opponent's deck right before their last turn. They lost. You know, you pass turn and you win. Tome Scour, obviously, it doesn't drive the deck, but it sure is hell nice to have. Because you need to win. Like, you've got an aggressive mindset versus a passive mindset, really. And since you're playing this deck, you probably want to go more passive. But if I can go for the win, I'm going to go for the win. So I keep Tome Scour in personally. And again, that's another change that you can make, is put Reprisal in place of the Tome Scour. I would not fault you for that decision at all, actually. I don't agree with Planar Cleanse out, Reprisal in, but if you want to take out Tome Scour, put Reprisal in, and that actually opens you up to put in the third Scry, the third Dissolve, I mean, that is a good call. I like Tome Scour in here personally. We'll see it get to work this week, but I'm sure we'll also see situations where Reprisal would have worked better for me. So that's completely up to you. Personally, I'm going to go with Tome Scour. We run 4 of them, 3 crabs, 4 Doorkeepers. Like I said, this guy is 0-4 early game. He's just a 2-drop, and he's an 0-4. Works really well, actually, in this build, because it slows down aggro decks, like I was saying. And, I mean, his trigger at your opponent's end step is going to start doing a lot of work for you. Think Twice is a must in this deck. 4 copies of Doorkeeper, 4 copies of Think Twice. Draw 2 cards with the flashback cost and everything. Super useful. It gels pretty well with Chasm Skulker. Chasm Skulker I don't think about ever. It's just kind of a bonus after I wipe the field. Chasm Skulker might crap out a bunch of tokens, which is nice. This guy's just in here for alternate win con. You know what I mean? He doesn't gel with our... And also, you know, the Squids have Island Walk, which is a nice bonus. Island Walk's always great. But this guy's just an alternate win con in case we can't mill them. A lot of times I'm milling them, but Chasm Skulker is going to be able to put some pressure on them and eat removal and keep it off our Doorkeeper and stuff like that. It's a good card. It's a great card, really, and it works in this deck. So we're going to go ahead and put 2 copies of him in here. Guard Jellyman. 3 copies of this guy. He can't be dealt combat damage. We kind of already touched on him as well. There's not too many cards in the format that are going to wipe him out in the aggro builds, unless aggro splashing white, because then they would have their own copies of the Wrath of God effect. The 3-mana one is going to cook you, though, especially if they have the 4/4 out, which is one of my plans when I run the aggro builds with the Satyr, is that you can get the 4/4s out and then wipe the field yourself, or not worry about your opponent having the 3-mana Wrath of God. It sucks. It's 3 damage to everything. It's going to get rid of this guy. It doesn't count as combat damage, obviously, so that's a problem. This is an important card in this deck, especially since it has evasion, so it can... Well, can you call it evasion when the card has defender? It has flying, so it can block everybody. And some of the bigger threats in the world are flying nowadays, so... I had 2 open slots, so I put in 2 dissolves. We've already kind of talked about how you could rearrange the deck a little bit to run a third. Scry is amazing, and countering spells is pretty great. The dedicated 2 blue, not really a problem in this deck, but I mean, you're not going to run into a problem with the 2 dedicated blue because the mana is pretty forgiving here. It comes when it's just, you have to think about, it's kind of a cost-benefit analysis when you're looking at dissolve, because to leave that open, you know, you've got your doorkeeper. Luckily, everything is pretty much instant speed. So if you don't dissolve, you can use your think twice, or you can use your doorkeeper. I'm just saying, you know, sometimes you don't have enough blue sources, and dissolve can be a bit trickier there because you don't want to keep your mana open forever. But it's not really that big of a deal because a lot of the stuff that we're doing is instant speed, you know, the inspiration and stuff like that. So you can make those decisions very easily at your opponent's end step after they're able to trick you. Coral Barrier is defender as well, so he gels well with the rest of the deck. He also puts out an Island Walking token, which is great. I mean, that does some work. You can put those guys down turn 3 and maybe start attacking if your opponent can't block, because you have a solid wall of defenders here, which is going to protect you pretty well. And then finally, we're going to be looking at 4 copies of Inspiration. So 2 Dissolves, 4 Coral Barriers, 4 Inspirations. Of course, that's just drawing 2 cards. It's good stuff. It's hilarious. I really like that. We all got a big kick out of that when it came out at the card shop. Anyway, the flavor text there. I like it. Millstone's a good card too. It's an artifact. There's not a lot of removal that people use for artifacts. Some of the life game builds and stuff like that could get a bit of an edge on you because of the Millstone. Because usually they run Angel Factory as well, which is not great for you. But like I said, I mean, there are some deck types that you're going to just run into problems with. Looking at the mana, we obviously skew harder blue. It just makes perfect sense, but we still want 8. And then the 4 guild gates, because we want to be able to play those cantrip walls early game. We want those on turn 2. If we have them in our opening hand, we want it to come down on turn. Absolutely, every time, because it's a real nice early drop. I mean, sometimes because then the cantrip's more important than playing your doorkeeper here. I want to call him door creeper. Because Wall of Omens gets you that card, and you're not going to be activating that ability early game. You're probably going to be waiting a while to use that, so it's pretty important to have the white in there. So that's how the mana breaks down. This build is really something else. It's been a lot of fun to play with, but it obviously has a lot of weaknesses. Like going through and talking about it, there are some other ways that you could take this thing to try and make it a bit stronger. It really depends on how your meta is right now. I've been facing more aggro decks recently, but it hasn't been such a problem that I would do the reprisal for Tome Scour thing. But having the extra dissolve is nice too, so that's definitely the one caveat that I would make, is that to kind of tweak this depending on what meta you're working with. We're obviously playing on Steam. I don't know if it's region, but region obviously affects it as well because it's what time of day you're playing. The time of day that I play on Steam, personally, I don't see a ton of aggro. If you are, then I would probably say to take out the Tome Scour and put in the reprisal. But again, I mean, that's kind of a win con for us. You got to ask yourself, what's more important, having an open win con or having the ability to stop your opponent from winning? I'd rather just kill my opponent. That's not a 1-to-1 ratio because the situations are so drastically, like, they're diametrically opposed. They're not even close to the same thing. Like, that's not even a Venn diagram. It's just like 2 circles. But I don't know. I like Tome Scour personally. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech. It's a complicated deck to talk about because it has so many weaknesses. It's not particularly hard to run. We're going to run it all week. It's a lot of fun, though, so I hope you guys will enjoy it. It's a good deck. I do like this deck, don't get me wrong. Like, put it together, have some fun with it. It wins. It wins a lot. Like, if your opponent's not aggro, you're going to win. I mean, the 2 counters in here are the perfect amount because there's not a ton of stuff that you need to counter because you've just got so much pressure on the board. Dredge is a bit of a problem, but if you keep your dissolves in hand, I mean, there's only a couple target cards that you have to get rid of with Dredge. Don't worry about countering when they're grabbing something out of the yard. Don't worry about countering, like, Treasured Find is what I'm trying to think of. Worry about countering what they get with it more than the Treasured Find, because you can always hang out and see what's going on and just hold on to your dissolve a little bit longer. I guess that's a bad blanket statement, but that's generally pretty good advice. Anyway, we'll see more battle strategies for this thing when we get into it. I mean, obviously, you're turning this guy sideways, using his ability, and smashing him with this guy a lot. So you got a couple of different win cons. You got a couple of different contingency plans. It's a strong deck. I mean, it's not going to lose unless you're in a real tough spot. But shit, there's a lot of decks that lose to turn 2 4/4 Hoplite. So maybe I shouldn't be talking about that as if it's the end-all be-all for this deck, like the measuring stick for this thing. But we'll work more on countering that kind of stuff in other builds. But this is a serious build. It's a contender, and I hope you guys will enjoy this week. Thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to check out the Patreon if you want to get involved and get some of those rewards for yourself. They range from, you know, being on screen battling me and maybe humiliating me in front of all your friends, / you know, creating decks like this, or giving me really good ideas for decks like this. And even there's a really cool one where you get to challenge me to make something really impossible, like all 1-drops would be a good idea for that, or something cool like that. Anyway, thanks again for watching, you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.